welcome, welcome. It's going to be just a few moments. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm going to get our speaker going. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday night. I had to think what day it is. So, I appreciate you guys coming. Welcome, Arielle.
You.
Did we need to promote Kristen as well as a panelist, or are you just you? We'll let Kristen chat up everybody in the comments.
Yeah, I don't know what her plans were.
Okay, we will see. So welcome, everybody. We'll give it just a couple minutes. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're excited about this presentation because I think it's information that I don't know. So we're excited to learn with everybody. So tonight I have Melissa Cardona, our fabulous senior resource specialist, and Liliana Alvarado, who is our wonderful translator and our wonderful resource specialist. So they're going to be assisting tonight. As we're letting people on, I will, after I introduce Arielle, I will go dark. We'll all go dark. So you'll just see Arielle and her screen. And then we'll be here in case you need anything. The chat is open. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A. Melissa and I will be going back and forth just to check. Arielle is going to be kind enough to be sending out the presentation in PDF that we'll send out hopefully tomorrow. If we can get it going.
Some logistical issues there.
Yes, I know. And then thank you for anybody who needs translation. Make sure you click on either the English or the Spanish on your world globe, at usually the bottom or the top. So welcome. And I see a few names I recognize. So happy to have you all. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I know Arielle's got a lot to talk about. We'll take questions at the end, Arielle, or do you want questions during the presentation?
I think probably at the end would be good. I plan to save at least 10 minutes or so at the end if that works for everyone.
Okay, so if you're like me and a little ADD, you can always just put them in the chat and we'll make sure to read them off. So Arielle can get them. I'm always afraid I'm going to forget. And thank you, Kristen, for introducing us to Arielle and making this presentation possible. So this presentation is part of our grant that we received from the Department of Developmental Services on early start services. And we know that one of the challenges families have is sometimes going from the early start services into preschool services. And being a mom whose son was in preschool a very long time ago, there are a lot of options and choices today. So we're really grateful to Arielle to come in and talk about, what is a good preschool program look like, and that there's options, because a lot of families don't know that you have options and what we should look for. And Arielle is, I don't want to say wearing two hats, but you also are a BCBA.
Yes.
You have a very developmental heart as well for the little ones. So I'm really excited to see your presentation. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm going to let you take it away.
Open that up for everybody. Okay, just 1 second. Over.
No problem. It always takes me a second to get the slideshow up and share your screen and all that good stuff.
Exactly. Does everyone have that up? They can see it okay?
No, we can't see it.
Oh dear. That's
all right.
Not good.
Let me see, maybe it's because I spotlighted you. So let's try it one more time.
How
There
about
you
now?
go. Perfect. You got it.
Okay, great. All right, so I'll get myself out of the way there. Great, well, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about this topic with you. Throughout my career, I've spent time with toddlers and teens and adults with autism. And as much as I've loved all of those experiences, some of my most joyful moments have been spent in the preschool setting. So it's one of my favorite topics. And as we begin, I think it's important to note that throughout this presentation, at times, I will be using identity-first language, so phrases like autistic student, autistic child, and I do so in an effort to be responsive to members of the autism community and advocates who say that autism is inseparable from who they are as people, and really something to be proud of. And that said, I also want to acknowledge that some families really feel more comfortable with person-first language, so phrases like child with autism or student with autism, because it places the individual before their diagnosis. And just note that both are valid choices, and really it's an individual choice for each family, what language they use, and each individual, what makes them feel the most comfortable. So if you do ask a question or share a story, please use the language that's most authentic to your family. This is a broad overview of the topics that we'll cover today related to the preschool transition. We'll talk about some types of preschools you may consider. We'll offer some tools for comparing placement options. I'll discuss inclusion and what it looks like, some ideas for preparing for preschool once you've chosen a spot, and also some tips for success once you're there. But before I dive into all of that, I first want to kind of talk about why you might consider preschool in the first place. There are many care options available to you, one of which may be continuing to take care of your child in your own home, which is very comfortable, very safe, very familiar. And it's hard to consider the idea of sending your little ones out to the care of people who begin as strangers. And I have to say, writing this presentation is very timely for my family, because on Monday, my first son and toddler will be transitioning to preschool for the first time. And there are moments where in my mom heart, I have thought, oh my goodness, he's too little. I'm gonna keep him at home and not let him out of my sight until he's 25. But as a developmental specialist, I've had to sometimes listen to that voice, but then also hear the voice in my head that's saying, there are long-term gains. And as much as it might be challenging to take on this new environment as a family, it's going to be worth it in the long run. And the things I considered for why it will be worth it and how it'll benefit my child long-term, and really any child, center around these 4 research-based areas that will really make a difference while your child is in preschool. And there's certainly not an exhaustive list, but there are 4 that I want to highlight. The first is group routines and also kindergarten readiness. These go really hand in hand. When your child enters that new preschool environment, they're going to be practicing new routines that they've never seen before. They're going to be learning when certain things happen, where they happen. And as they're doing that, they're going to be learning some really important skills, like making predictions, understanding cause and effect. They're going to start to recall events and be able to share that information with others throughout the day. And it turns out that those skills are very important for reading later on. Similarly, they will also be encountering some things that might be a little bit challenging. There might be times in a preschool setting where your child has to stop playing when they don't want to, or they have to say goodbye to mom and dad or another caregiver, even though it's really hard. And as parents, we might look at these crocodile tear moments and go, oh gosh, we have things to do, or this is so distressing. I don't want to see my child upset. But teachers are prepared with the really subtle skills to take those moments of sadness and turn them into learning opportunities. So they're going to be there to coach your child through how to take a deep breath, feel their sad feelings, maybe carry them for a little while, but still move on with the day. They're going to teach them how to self-soothe and maybe not always need to rely on an adult. And even though those are not directly connected to academics, those skills will help your child cope when they do get into a kindergarten setting and maybe in a larger group. There isn't always that person there to coach them. And so really those two things work together. The next is building friendships. This is something that I have loved to witness. I was shocked when I transitioned from more of a one-on-one setting as an ABA provider into the preschool environment at Alexis Place at Rady Children's Hospital. The social setting of 3-year-olds is mind-blowing. At this really young age, they already can tell you often who's their best friend. They're already working on conflict resolution and how to work through an argument together over a toy or even something bigger. And they understand when someone's new. They're practicing those skills for welcoming that newcomer and really just learning how to be with others. And this is so important for later on when, again, they'll have less and less support as they move into bigger and bigger settings in elementary school and beyond. And being able to start practicing so young sets them up for those situations. And all those 3 previous things happen against the backdrop of really high quality play. So as someone with a developmental background, I thought, I'm at home with my child often. I can set up preschool experiences. I know how to make a sensory table. These things will be really easy. It turns out it's really hard to live your life and also constantly be providing your child with new experiences. I'm sure you can relate. Some people are better at it than I am, but it was something that was a struggle. So knowing that children in preschool have this opportunity to interact with individuals who have dedicated time set aside to make exciting experiences happen every day is something I'm really excited for, anticipating my son's transition. And the last idea I'll leave you with to consider when you're weighing the benefits of preschool is that it's honestly the reality for the majority of the children today under the age of 5. So in 2015, this data shows that 70% of children were enrolled in some kind of group care option. And that means that 70% were flexing their behavior regulation, social and academic muscles on a regular basis leading up to kindergarten. They're practicing. And while a child who stayed at home may be just as successful, they will not have had that opportunity to practice every day in a thoughtful way. And so it might make that transition into a school environment at kindergarten just a little bit more of an uphill challenge. All right. So hopefully I've gotten you really excited for the idea of preschool. Now we'll talk about some ways that preschool might look, some options that you have. Of these options here, the first 3, district preschool program or special education, Head Start, and California State Preschool, are going to be somewhat more structured options. So they have curriculum that is fairly teacher-led. The environments are fairly familiar. They may might think of what you generally picture to be a preschool classroom. When you enter these spaces, you'll see that. Private preschool and homeschool have a little bit more variability. Private preschool might be very different from site to site, depending on the philosophy that they follow. And homeschooling is really up to each individual home. And so we'll go into those in much more detail in the next couple of slides. I also want to note that, as Beth mentioned at the beginning, I created these slides really as a resource for you. So some are very dense in terms of wording, but the purpose is so that you can refer back to them later. We might not go over every single bullet on every single page. All right. So step 1, you have 5 different choices and perhaps some others, but regardless of the direction you plan on going, the most important thing you can do to begin is connect with your local school district. So this is a process that will allow you access to what's called an individualized education program. And an individualized education program looks at where your child is today, considers where they might need to be in a year, and connects the dots from now until then. So it sets out goals for them, looks at any accommodations they might need, and is really an important tool to guide either placement in a district school program. It's kind of the most direct connection, but it can also give you priority placement in other programs like Head Start. It can also help with California State Preschool Program. So whichever you decide, make sure you start with your school district. This is a kind of basic path for how you might do that. Step 1 is to find what school district you're in. You may use this tool, Great Schools, it's just one example, but there are many others. And then next will be finding your home school. The link here is an example for Riverside Unified School District, finding your home school. And your next step would be to call and request an evaluation. From there, the school would take over. It's always individualized by district and site. After this process, as I said, the most direct route would be to go straight into a district preschool program. And some of the benefits of these programs are that they're no cost to families. It's part of a public school. Something really important to mention is that all of the teachers in these programs are fully qualified credentialed teachers, most of whom have a 4-year degree in special education and how to support individuals with learning differences. And this is different from some other settings, and really important to just keep in mind as a benefit. Another thing to remember is that in order to be in this program, your child does have to qualify for an IEP in most cases. There are some inclusion programs across the county, and certainly something that's worth looking into. A third benefit is that you may be able to access speech and occupational therapy on site at this placement. That's something that if you are more rural, may be a little bit more difficult to access on a regular basis, and it might be right there for you at the school placement. Some limitations are that, as I mentioned, the IEP team has to decide whether your child's eligible for this program, but you will be a part of conversations and can kind of state your case if it's something you really feel like is important for your child. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all preschool programs are inclusive, so you may not always have the opportunity for your child to interact with neurotypical peers in a district placement. Here's a few tools. If you're curious about the IEP or you've never heard that term before, I really encourage you to dig into them and just become more familiar with the terminology and what that really important document can do for you. On to the next one. So Head Start is another program that's available at no cost to eligible families. And this is a much more supportive service than really any of the other programs. It involves developmental, medical, dental, vision, hearing, and nutrition screenings, in addition to any follow-up care that might be noted as necessary after these screenings, and home visits. So this is a really wonderful program you might consider if you want to be very involved and you want a lot of support in different areas for your child. It also involves individual goals. This is different than the IEP, but progress is being tracked for each child. And something exciting to note is that a minimum of 10% of enrollment for these programs is reserved for children with disabilities. So even if you don't meet the income requirement, your child is likely eligible for the program near you. Assuming some of the limitations have been overcome, like waitlists, there can be high demands for these programs, but it's certainly worth looking into because of that priority placement option. These are just a couple of options within the Riverside district, but there are Head Start options outside of that area. And most of the resources I found are a quick Google search away. So if you're outside of this area, certainly look into that and you should be able to find things pretty quickly. Next up is the California State Preschool Program. This is fairly similar to Head Start in some ways. It does kind of go beyond the basics of academics, and it covers development, health services, social services, and nutritional services. There's also a strong parent education and parent participation component, which might be really exciting to you, especially if that idea of separating from your child is hard. This program really wants you there and involved. The potential limitation is it's only offered at certain locations. So again, search your area and see if this might be available. And something I didn't read, but also applies to the other three programs, other two programs I mentioned so far, is that they follow school year calendar. So if you are looking for true childcare, you will need to have other options if you choose district, Head Start, or California State Preschool Program for during those breaks, like spring break and summer break. I double clicked. So here's a list of some of those California State Preschool programs and also an explanation of the eligibility for those programs. All right. So our next option is probably the most varied from site to site. Private preschools are private businesses regulated and inspected by the California Child Care Licensing Agency. And something that I've noted as both a benefit and a limitation is their teacher-student ratios are regulated. So they're required to have one teacher for every 6 toddlers and one teacher for every 12 preschool-age children. And depending on what you're comparing to, that may be a better ratio, it may be a more challenging ratio, but it's just something to keep in mind, that there could potentially be 24 children in a classroom and 2 teachers. If for your child that wouldn't provide enough support, something you can think about is because these are private businesses, they have the freedom to collaborate with other service providers. So if your child is receiving in-home ABA services and you want to talk to your agency and ask them to bring the therapist on site, you can do that. They may also accept subsidies, which can help to offset that out-of-pocket cost that can sometimes be a little bit prohibitive if you're looking at private preschool programs. A couple other limitations to note is that nap time might be a required part of your child's day. I know that my child does not love napping or any sort of bedtime routine, so this is something I would really have to plan ahead for. And we have layers and layers of supports built in for when he heads to school on Monday. So these are some indicators of quality childcare that might be most helpful when you're comparing different private preschool options because they can vary so much. But it's something that also is good to keep in mind for really any setting that you're looking at. Small group size and low caregiver to child ratios are huge. As a parent, you may have had moments if you're caring for siblings or cousins, other children in your home, where you feel like you need octopus arms because everybody needs something and you can't meet everyone's demands at the same time. So this is something that teachers experience too. And if there are small class sizes and there's fewer demands being placed on the teacher's more readily available to meet those demands quickly and in a very individualized way. So that's something important to look for. How big are the classes? Next, thinking about strong parent and provider relationships. You really want to feel welcome on campus anytime. If you're going to a California licensed facility, private preschool, you're actually required by the licensing to be able to go on site anytime and ask to see your child's classroom. So that's kind of the basics, but beyond that, you really want to feel that the school cares about interacting with you, that they care about hearing your concerns, and that they want to partner with you in your child's early education journey. Because really at this stage, school is just one part of the child's life and home life is still very important. So it needs to be a partnership. The next thing to consider is consistent relationships. It can take a child 2 or 3 months to really feel comfortable with a set of teachers. So the school has a policy where they're moving children from classroom to classroom quickly that may not be in your child's best interest. It's much better to look for a situation where they can remain with a set of teachers for at least 6 months to a year, and also that there's not a lot of turnover at the school. Something I loved about working, have loved about working at Alexis Place San Diego is that we have 2 staff members who've been there for over 20 years. So they're able to give us all of that insight and all of that learning about our setting and how it's evolved over time. And it's always been a helpful foundation. We have those people to go to. Next, staff qualifications. There's many different ways that schools can set themselves apart. One thing that comes to mind at Alexis Place is that we require all of our teachers in the early childhood setting to have a bachelor's degree. Other schools may be very high quality and not require that level of qualification, but you want to know what the teachers know when they're coming in. Next, health and safety practices. The school should be clean. The school should look safe. It should look welcoming. They should be feeding nutritious snacks, and they should be encouraging children to wash their hands, ask about diaper changing practices, things like that. All of those things go into your child's day and kind of go beyond the basic academics, but are important. Next, licensing and accreditation. Ask about the license, ask if there has been any violations to the license recently and kind of the background of what those might have been. And you also might consider looking for accreditation. And this is granted by national commissions such as NACC or NAFCC. And these programs say that, or these outside organizations say that a particular program has really gone above and beyond to be excellent. Okay, and with this option, we really hit a fork in the road. All the other 4 options that I've outlined are center or school-based. And for many reasons, this might not be the most appropriate setting for your child. So with homeschooling, you apply that preschool mindset and that goal-driven activity mindset to your own home. And it's really different than just caring for your child at home. It requires a lot more effort and a lot more planning, but it might be something that's within your reach and is best suited for your individual family. It gives you a lot of freedom to design their experience around your personal values. I know a family who chose to homeschool partly because they really wanted to interweave their faith into all of the teaching and didn't have a program available to do that. So they're working on the same goals, just with that slightly different lens. If you do decide to homeschool, I would really encourage you to look for support from homeschool communities. It's not something that you want to dive into alone, because that can be really hard. And you also want to think about how you'll structure the schedule, because you may have extra time to incorporate other therapies or extracurricular activities like speech or OT or behavioral services. Some limitations are fairly obvious. It's a huge demand on caregiver time and resources. And you also have to be really thoughtful about planning the day, especially if you're caring for other children. You may need to kind of block off every day during nap time for one sibling. I'm going to be working with my child with autism and preparing them to be ready for kindergarten when that transition comes. Here are some examples of homeschool groups, and then also some activity ideas. You may also consider, if you go down this route, adopting an actual homeschool curriculum, but that would be an investment. So something to research and think about. I don't know if here would be a good place for just a couple of questions before we get too much further. I don't know what the chat looks like. I've had it minimized, but I can also go on.
We don't have anything in the chat or the Q&A. We'll give it just a second to see if anybody has any questions. Thank you for sharing that this is something you're going through personally as well.
Yeah. I also hope that, speaking of personally, my little one is putting up quite a fuss in the background, so I apologize for any background noise.
You never have to apologize in our community, because that's how we live life. So it's all
True.
good. It is all good. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'll give it just a second before. Do all districts offer free preschool programs?
All districts are required to have programs. It may not be that in your district, every homeschool has a program. So I have worked with children where their homeschool is around the corner, and because of a child's specific needs, they may be going to a different school that's a little bit further away because those programs are centralized. The reason for that typically is to keep that knowledge base together. So there may be an autism specific program at Hillside School, and there may be a Down syndrome specific program at another school. And something that's really great about the IEP process is if your child is going to a school besides their homeschool, and also sometimes your homeschool, if you need busing options, those might be available. And it's definitely something to ask about, and that can kind of help alleviate that transportation challenge.
Perfect. And then Eva had a great idea that she asked if we could put all the links in the email that we send out, just to make it easier so they don't have to. And I said, great idea, we will do that. Perfect. So lots of great resources. All right, I think you're good to go.
Okay.
Oh,
so
wait,
next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more.
Oh, that's okay.
I know it's hard to type. I'm not a very fast typer on my laptop either.
That's okay.
We have a couple more. Let's do this one first. Do private preschools work with IEPs?
So private preschools are not required at all to follow an IEP. But again, because they're an individual business, one particular business may value that document and the accommodations and goals that it offers. So they might not follow it formally, they may be able to incorporate some of the strategies. So in almost every case, I would recommend that if you have an IEP, you do present that to the private preschool that you choose, and have them look it over and discuss how they might be able to incorporate it.
That's great. And then another question, can we expect that speech and OT will be offered at Head Start for kids that need it?
That is a question that I don't actually know the answer to. I do think that with the screenings, it may be a part of the follow-up care, but I'd have to defer to Kristen on that one because I haven't worked in Head Start program.
And Kristen, I don't know if we can let Arielle keep going and you type an answer, if that works. And if not, we'll take you off mute at the end. So hold that question. All right, keep going.
Okay. So next we'll get into comparing placement options and some tools for making those decisions between the different programs. The first is thinking about, this is a little bit of a complicated point, but it's something that a lot of my families at Alexa's Place have run into, and it can be really confusing. So I wanted to make sure I included it. If your child has a medical diagnosis of autism, that means they've met with a San Diego regional center, not necessarily San Diego, regional center provider, and had an evaluation, or they've gone through their insurance and been seen by a psychologist and gotten that diagnosis of autism. They're not necessarily eligible for an IEP, and they don't necessarily meet educational eligibility for additional services. The reason for that is that the school district's criteria is that a child's autism must impact their ability to learn in order for them to be eligible for services. So it can be a little bit confusing, but the goal is that children are really in the least restrictive setting possible. So if your child has autism and is able to access the general education curriculum with no supports, that's something really to be celebrated, even though, again, it can be confusing. Another thing to consider is the income requirements for Head Start and the California State Preschool program. This is an example of those limits for a family of 4. There are different limits for each family size. And while these may not apply to your family and you might discount that option because of these numbers, remember that if a child has an IEP, they are given priority placement. So don't discount them, still ask questions about it. Next up is family considerations. Even though you're really making this decision for the autistic child, it's important to remember that they're a part of your entire family system. So a decision made for that child is going to impact everyone else in the family in some way. And the first thing I want you to consider is family balance. I have 2 stories to kind of illustrate this point. The first is a family who really went all in to achieve family balance. Another was a family that had to take a step back in order to do that. The first family, the child was diagnosed just a little bit before 3 and was no longer eligible for regional center early care services in the Bay Area where the family was from. So in order to find balance for the many behavioral struggles they were having, their concerns about the child's language, their lack of family support, they sought out programs in the San Diego area, found Alexa's Place, and were so excited to come that they put their house up for rent. They moved the whole family of 3 down south and moved in with grandma and grandpa. And that was a way to kind of meet all of their needs at the same time. And they had that family support that they needed. They were able to access Alexa's Place and all those services. And it meant a big sacrifice. Mom started working remotely, and that was a challenge, but it got them what they needed for the whole family. In another circumstance, I had a child last year that I worked with where he was the second of 3 siblings, all of whom had autism. And the oldest and youngest were already in a district placement, and he was the one child who was at Alexa's Place. In order to pay for that, the family had an extra insurance plan, and it really just became too much of a burden. So as much as they were enjoying the experience, their child had friends, they had great relationships with the providers, in order to achieve family balance, they had to take a step back and enroll that child in the district program with his brothers, so that they could have one drop off, one contact, and that worked better for them. So really thinking about what your whole family needs, because if the whole family is happy, it's going to serve the individual with autism. Next is consistency. I can't tell you how many times we've seen children at Alexa's Place who came in with major behavioral concerns that seemed insurmountable at the beginning, We're able to slowly work through them day by day with consistent practices and support. It is really, really important that you show up. Even the best teachers can't make a difference if you're not there. So choose a program that you can be at and really regularly attend, even if it means you're choosing part-time over full-time. Next is prioritizing goodness of fit. The program that all of your neighbors are going to and everybody's talking about might not be the best program for your individual child. Maybe all the neighbors love it because the artwork on the wall is beautiful and the furniture is just perfect and all the materials look like so much fun. But the thing your child really cares about is playing outside. So he doesn't want to do artwork. He doesn't want to sit at that beautiful furniture. He wants access to the outdoors. So you might choose a different program that really works for your child based on their individual needs. The last one is trust your instincts. I have another personal story for this one. When we were hiring a nanny for my son, we went through all the steps. We asked for resumes. We asked for references. We interviewed. The first two candidates were perfect. They were very professional. They had everything we asked for. The last candidate didn't really have very many references, didn't have a lot of experience being a nanny in the United States. But she was able to speak Farsi with my son. And when she came in the door, the first person she talked to was the 10-month-old in the room. The first person she made smile was the 10-month-old in the room. Every time we were having conversation with her and he kind of made a social bid, she would turn and engage with him and put us on hold. So we made the on-the-spot decision that this is the person who really connects with our child. And even though maybe those other things that we thought we valued weren't there, everything else was. And we just felt so good about it that we moved forward, and she's great. Next, we'll talk about inclusion. So this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. I've loved my experience in inclusive programs. I have seen inclusion run really well with adults in an art studio in New Zealand, where everyone was welcome to come and do art regardless of the sports that they needed. And I've seen it work great in preschool at Alexa's place. So it's a big idea. Basic definition for inclusion is the practice of fully including all people at typical community experiences by creating environments in which all individuals and groups feel welcome, respected, supported, and valued. And this can happen in two different ways. You may have top-down programs. The two that I mentioned, that art studio and Alexa's place, are settings that are set up at every single level from the top down to ensure that individuals with learning differences or social differences are really successful. And that's great. It does make it a little bit easier on families because they don't need to come to the table with their own ideas as often. But you can also achieve inclusion from that bottom-up perspective as well. So if the family is coming and saying, here's the needs of my child, we would love to be a part of your program. You may have never served a child with autism before, but I think we can partner with you. That can also be really successful if the school is receptive and wants to partner with the family. Ultimately, inclusion is an active process. So it should include everyone who's supporting your child, really thinking about on a day-to-day basis, how can we find joy for them? How can we make them want to be here? How can we help them learn in a way that's really meaningful? It's not a passive process. So I have had experiences in the past where a child on the spectrum is welcome to come to the school. The school's happy to have them there, but the school's not actively working to make that environment work for the child. I had the opportunity to tour a school before a child transitioned over to Alexa's place, and they said, "Oh, we're so happy he's coming to you. Look, see, he's here, but this is just what he does." And the child was very separate from the group. He wasn't being invited to join in, and there really weren't those invitations from the teachers to be a part of the community. While they loved him, it was more of a passive inclusion and not that active effort to make him a part of the group. So these are some ways that a school might really take on that active effort. First, they can think about your child's interests, and they might be something completely unusual. So I've worked with children who loved roller coasters. I worked with children who loved the internal workings of clocks. One child I love to share a story about loved sticks. And he wanted to carry them, he wanted to look at them, he wanted to wave them, he wanted to have one in his pocket every day, he wanted to bring one in the car. And in some schools, that behavior may have been discouraged, and teachers may have said, oh, put that stick down, that's not a safe choice, you're going to trip and fall. In other schools, the teachers may have said, like, oh, yeah, I don't know why he's playing with sticks all the time, that's weird. Hopefully not that extreme. But the story that I'd like to share from Alexa's place is that when we saw that this behavior of playing with sticks was sometimes keeping the child separate from the group, we invited all of the children in the classroom to a stick party. And so one day at circle time, the teacher said, listen, tomorrow, I want you all to come to school with your favorite, most amazing stick. And we're going to play with, we'll call him Elliot. We're going to play with Elliot on the playground with our sticks. And so the kids did, and they brought big ones and little ones and rough ones and smooth ones. And they were so excited to share their sticks with Elliot, who previously they hadn't had as many social connections with. End result of this was that he felt joyfully included. They got to learn that looking at the world a little bit differently is okay and can sometimes even be more fun than the way you may have looked at it before. And his family really got to feel that his individuality was celebrated. The next thing to consider is the sensory environment that makes your child feel most successful and most comfortable. So I'd love to share a story here about a student named Braden. The entire time he was in my program, we worked with him on overcoming some of his sensory defensiveness. He didn't like to touch thick, sticky things. So yogurt was out, finger paint was out, it was not his favorite. And because we were a program that was working on goals, we were working on trying to desensitize him. But then we also worked on advocacy, because we knew that there may be some circumstances where he encountered people who didn't understand why this was such a problem for him. And one of our most shining moments as his treatment team was when we heard that on the first day of kindergarten, he was supposed to put his hand in white finger paint and make a handprint on a paper. And he was able to tell the teacher, I'm sorry, I don't like that. May I have a marker instead? So this is something that really is huge for this child, because we thought about the sensory environment when he was in school. We tried to make it comfortable for him. We also gave him the tools to make it comfortable for himself, and he used those tools. So again, it's an active process every day, thinking about what the child needs. Another thing a school might do to actively include your child is consider their social motivation. There have been some mindsets in the past that kind of came at the social challenges of autism with the idea that making every child into a social butterfly and helping them have lots of friends is the ideal outcome. But the reality is that that's not what all people want, let alone all people on the spectrum. I had two students, Mary and Laura, who came into our program, and they didn't prefer to speak in the group at all. They preferred to be much more removed, be observers. And when we realized that sometimes they're removing themselves and observing, put them in the same spaces, we tried to think of ways that we could arrange the environment so there were quiet areas that they could both withdraw together. And as they did that day after day, they slowly built this quiet, passive friendship. So they would hand each other materials, or they might whisper briefly. They might bring in something from home and just show it quietly. But for them, this is what friendship looked like. This is maybe how their friendships will continue in the future. They may want to quietly watch a movie with someone as an adult and not necessarily have back and forth conversation every day. But we were preparing them for whatever outcome makes them feel most comfortable in the future. The next thing to take into consideration is self-regulation strategies. So your child may use self-stimulatory behaviors to regulate. So something like rocking or hand flapping. And remember, that's them using a tool to help themselves, and it's serving them a purpose. So the school's role in this situation is to understand what that purpose is, and to really try to help the child be safe, first of all, but then also get what they need. So if what they really truly need is to rock or hand flap, the school should accept that and help to normalize it with other students and explain the purpose that's all serving for them. And if there is something your child might be doing to regulate that's unsafe, the school's job is to actively work to help them find another outlet. All right. Here are some inclusion resources. If you were to check out really anything after this talk, one thing that I'd really recommend is the Lead for Inclusion website. It has some great tools like book lists and TED Talks that really feature disabled individuals and also specifically individuals with autism, and can just be a wonderful lens into what life looks like as your children grow up. Okay, finally, we'll move on to preschool preparation. It looks like we've got about 13 minutes left, so I'll get through this part and make sure that we have time for some questions. The first thing I'd recommend is to take a tour. And if possible, bring your child along for that tour. Nothing speaks more loudly than being there, seeing it, immersing yourself in the environment. And doing so can really help to familiarize your child with that environment. It can help prepare you for pickup and drop off, which can be stressful at the beginning. And it lets you see how staff are interacting with the other children in their care. I'd really observe those classrooms if you can, and kind of listen to how they're talking to kids and get a feel for what it's like to be there every day. The next thing I would do is ask questions. And it can be hard in the moment to think of everything that you might want to ask. So I'd really encourage you to write some of these questions down and think about what you might want to know about the school, how they celebrate holidays. Might be something that doesn't come to mind at first, but it might be really important to you. It might be something that you want to share. If they allow other family members to come and share stories during circle time, that might be something, again, you don't think about when you're touring, but maybe sit down to write down some things that are important to your family. Something I've also loved is families who come up with an All About Me cover page. And the screenshot here is actually from Teachers Pay Teachers, and it was free. It's just the example. So if you're not as graphically minded, you can download one. And this is a way to just really personalize your child. You're going to come to the meeting with a teacher or director with all the formal documents like an IEP and diagnostic report. But if you can put that cover page on top that says, this is us, this is our family, this is our child, that can really help them connect with you. The last, well, a couple more things, but one of the last things to do is connect with the parent community. Where I live, there's a really active Facebook group for moms where people will post recent programs they've encountered, summer camps that they've enjoyed. So if you're a part of any groups like that, it might be worth asking, have you had experience with this particular school? Tell me about it. And you may even be able to post anonymously if that's a concern. If you can meet with other parents, even just as you're walking out in the parking lot from a tour, ask them about their experiences and what it's been like to be there. And if you happen to know any families who are already there, it might be really fun to set up play dates for your child so that then when they walk in on the first day, they see some familiar faces. Excuse me, sorry. And the last thing to do is at Alexa's place, the front desk people know everything and everyone. They see all the faces coming in, they get to hear those stories. So it's likely that a preschool that you choose, those front desk staff are some great people to know really well. They might be the ones calling you if your child has the sniffles or falls down. So having them be a familiar face can be helpful too. And finally, as I said, transitions can be a stressful time. So you may want to proactively think about ways that you can lighten your family load during those first couple of weeks. If that's the week that you plan for takeout, that might be smart. Or if it's a week where you're preparing only your child's absolute favorite foods because you don't want to fight that dinner table battle if they're tired and exhausted from all these new experiences. You also want to plan ahead for not placing as many other demands on them. So it might be a week that they don't clean up as many toys. And just kind of thinking about what it would be like if you were suddenly dropped in a place where you didn't know anybody. It would take a lot of your energy. And as much as it's great for your child in the long term, in the short term, you might need to be kind of shoring them up a bit. I'll tell a quick story about a student who had a really challenging transition to Alexa's place because of that experience. He had been in another school that was very familiar. He knew the routine. And the parents were really distressed in the first couple of weeks. They said, we've never seen tantrums like this, and he's not sleeping, and we're worried. But because they were very forthcoming, they explained all those concerns to the teachers, we were able to make those connections that really it's this transition. He's trying to understand this new space. And we were able to give him things like visual representation of the routine. We were able to kind of pull back ourselves so that when he was there, he could really explore without having to interact with every activity to its fullest. And after a couple of weeks, everything smoothed out and things are going much better for him. Okay. You stuck with me this far. So now we're on tips for continued success. So once you've enrolled in a program, you've kind of moved through those first couple of weeks, that can be a challenge, but you were prepared, so it's okay. Some things you can do to keep your child successful are really relying on your team. Communication can be hard. There's multiple children in the classroom, no matter how small or big the class is. There's a lot of voices coming to the teachers. So it can be hard to always hear everything you need to about every single day. But if you have a plan for consistent communication, that can help you to overcome any kind of frustrations that might arise from just not having information that you need. So whether it's an email, whether it's regular phone calls, whether it's quarterly parent-teacher conferences or home visits, make sure that you're ready to really engage in those conversations and be prepared. Take time to read their lesson plans so you know what your child has been doing. Next, think beyond your classroom. As I said, some schools may allow you to bring outside support staff. So you might be able to have an ABA provider on site. You might be able to have your speech therapist set up a one-time call with a teacher and share some strategies that have worked in the past. And you might be able to plan ahead and think with that team for ways to engage in community events outside of the day-to-day preschool routines. Something like a birthday party might be intimidating to think about based on where your child is now. But now that you have this preschool team and you may have other support providers, you can talk together about ways before that event happens that you can really make it a joyful experience instead of a stressor. And the last thing I'll share is that staying involved with the preschool can be wonderful for your entire family. I have always loved seeing siblings in the hallway, and sometimes you'll see the trickle-down effect. So the first child has a harder transition, but by the second or third one, they're like, oh, I've seen big brother do this, I've seen big sister do this, whatever, drop me off, it's okay. It can also be wonderful for parents to experience this huge time of growth for their children as a cohort. So if you enroll your child for the first time, get to know other parents that drop off and pick up. It may be that they end up being lifelong friends. We've seen that happen countless times at Alexa's place. And finally, if you can volunteer in the classroom, that can be a really meaningful way to share the experience with your child and other parents and the teachers and just stay involved. So ask about if they'll let you read a story. If you play an instrument, maybe you can present it. Once at Alexa's place, we had a parent bring an entire aquarium full of lobster that the family had got when they were diving together. So you never know what might be interesting or valuable in a preschool setting. All right. But that's the end. Thank you so much. And again, I apologize for the background noise. We did not anticipate that this would be quite so challenging from home.
No, it was fine, Arielle. There was no background noise. It was great.
Oh, wonderful. That's good.
We have a couple questions, but I want to let everybody know I put a link in the chat. We are going to be giving away 2 $25 Amazon gift cards. We have it's a 7-question, super easy. It's like 2-minute survey on the presentation if you enjoyed it and all that good stuff, if you learned anything. So if you can, please click on the link and take the survey while Arielle answers these last couple questions. And
I have plenty of time, so if we need to go over, that's okay for me too.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. We have a question. Is there a specific medical professional whose diagnosis bears more weight? And that's to make sure that the child would be deemed eligible for services.
I think if you're considering that challenge between medical diagnosis and educational eligibility, No, I would always encourage you to see a developmental pediatrician, a psychologist, someone who can give you a comprehensive evaluation, which means that they're doing a full battery of tests, because that will help you to access lots of different services and will also give you the best information. But even with this document, you still may not be eligible for IEP services. And typically, if you're not eligible, it's because your child is really successful. So in most cases, that circumstance is something that is worth celebrating. But if you do feel like that determination has been arrived at in error, there's a separate process aside from the diagnosis process that you can engage in with the school district. So you can ask them to review it, and it is all regulated by federal legislation. So you definitely have recourse if you need.
And I'm also going to mention that, you know, schools provide educational services. So if you're looking for the school just to provide speech or occupational therapy, that's something medical insurance may also provide outside of school hours. So there's also different options out there. So great answer, Arielle.
And sometimes those individual services through insurance are more intensive. The school can be really limited because they're required to serve everyone who's qualified. So you might have good luck looking at independent services if you just need speech or just need OT.
Okay, keep taking those surveys. 5 people have taken the surveys, so I know you guys can keep doing it. We have another great question about twins. Is there a scenario where my son with autism, who's been diagnosed with autism, who's a twin, can attend the same preschool with his neurotypical twin sister? Or should I prepare the twins for the fact that they will be separated?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I would make that decision based on the needs of each child. So that might be one of those moments where you're really considering family balance. If your greatest value is keeping the kids together, I would look for a program that can do that. I know, again, I'm always speaking to Alexis Place because that's my most recent and long-term experience. But at Alexis Place, we had 2 students who were at very different levels. They were both diagnosed with autism, but they were twins, and the family said they must be kept together. So even in moments where it may have made sense to move one child up because of her skills, we kept her with her sister because that's really what was important to them. So if that's the most important thing to your family, find a program that can accommodate that. If there's a situation where your student with autism really needs more supports, then it might be worth considering that separating for a short period of time in preschool may better prepare them to be potentially reunited again in elementary school. It just kind of depends on where they are.
A great answer to a very hard question. So.
Yeah, it's tough.
And we had another question. What was the website to create the All About Me one page?
There is a great website for lots of free resources called Teachers Pay Teachers. Not all of them are free, but usually it's fairly nominal, like $1 or $2 if you want access to a document. So that one, I think I search for All About Me IEP cover sheet or something like that in order to find that.
And I think Canva, if people have a free membership to Canva, also has a lot of options too. So yeah, great resources. All right. I think we're at time. Any other questions? Did I get them all? Let me check one more time. I think we got them all. You did awesome. You're like perfect timing.
Thanks so much. I've practiced. So
oh, well,
it helps.
Like us, right? Like what we do with our kids. Practice makes perfect. So exactly. That was great. All right. If you guys wait just another minute, I will make the announcement of who won the gift cards.
Sorry, Beth, not to cut you off. There is one more question that says, is there a program similar to Alexis Place in the Inland Empire area?
Oh, thank you, Melissa.
I do know that there are some programs specifically in Riverside County that are working to develop inclusion. Some have active programs already, some are in pilot. I would definitely ask about that in either school district or California State preschool programs. I would have to follow up with a list. I don't have those right offhand, But really at any school, I would ask about inclusion and if that's an option.
Okay, Arielle, pick a number between 1 and 8.
8 is my favorite number, so we'll go with that one.
Oh, good, Lupe. Lupe Sanchez. So congratulations. You won a $25 gift card. And one more.
3.
That would be Susie Villalobos. So great. That's awesome. I will be emailing you guys tomorrow with your gift cards, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Arielle and Kristen, for all your work on this presentation. Lots of great information. So we appreciate you, and just, you know, it's a new time to learn about different types of options. So you did it very well, and very lovingly to individuals that might have some fears. I see Susie has her hand up. Susie, are you able to type it? Let me see if Susie will do that.
I also saw a question in the chat about the slides. I apologize. I've tried to email them from the Rady servers. It's too big. I've tried emailing them from my home computer. So I'm going to have to tap my tech savvy husband and have him figure out how I can attach these slides, because the Canva presentations are really dense. So I can certainly get those to Beth by tomorrow if emailing out is an option later.
Great. Well, we'll figure it out, right? We're flexible. So. All right. Thank you all for sharing your evening with us, and we will get the information out to you. I'm hoping tomorrow, but Friday at the latest. So have a good evening. Stay safe, and we appreciate all of you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.